Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to use my best teacher's voice to call us to attention, please, and be that person who is going to interrupt your great conversation and your lunch to get us going with our keynote address. My name is Diane O'Leary. I direct our Legal Innovation and Technology concentration here at the law school, and I want to take another minute to just congratulate our students, some of whom I've worked with, and my colleagues. I go to conferences sometimes and someone says, "Oh, you do the legal tech stuff at Suffolk?" Because at their school, there maybe is one person that does that. And I'm just so constantly reminded of how lucky we are at Suffolk to have a team of folks doing this. So we've heard two words a lot today: innovation and technology. Technology moves super fast, and innovation, we all know, sometimes moves super slow. And I think today's keynote speaker has a bit of something to say about going fast and keeping pace. He shared with me that a few years ago, I don't know how many, I'll let him keep that detail to himself, he finished 111th in the Boston Marathon, just a mile down the street. And second was 1 second at the US National 100K Championships. Now, I've run some 5Ks and 10Ks, but I did have to do the math to double check. So that's a cool like 62 miles or so. We talked to our students about legal tech founders and startups, and Daniel shared with me he founded a DC running club called Dojo of Pain, which for those of us that think about running and think about keeping up with legal innovation and technology, maybe pain is a word to which we can relate. So welcome Daniel Yee. He is the Senior Counsel for Special Projects and Innovation at the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Before that, he was a trial attorney specializing in fair housing cases. He directed the DOJ's fair housing testing program, kind of an issue near and dear to us at Suffolk with our own clinical fair housing work. Today, Daniel leads the Civil Rights Division's effort to use design process, entrepreneurial principles, all those things we've been talking about, collaboration, mindset, et cetera, to get at thorny legal problems, to put it simply. He also runs the DOJ's and the division's concept lab to help others do all of that work that he's trying to do as well. Professionally, he's a board member of CLOC, the well-known corporate legal operations consortium. Some lucky students are also able to try to keep pace with Daniel in the classroom. He's a lecturer at Harvard Law and Georgetown University Law Center, where he teaches classes on innovation, practical problem solving, and communication design. This is where I'd probably wrap up a keynote intro with some impressive, but let's be honest, boring academic background. Daniel's federal clerkship. He's a graduate of the College of William and Mary and Yale Law School. And that's all well and good. But the last thing I'll say about Daniel is that he shared with me that his pet, Corgi, is actually just as fast and nimble as he is. And recently, Pemberton, Corgi, 3-year-old, won his first official Corgi dog race. And the biggest regret of this introduction is that I didn't share the picture that Daniel shared with me, but you can find that after. So apparently his ability to inspire both humans and others to kind of keep pace and stay fast and alert extends to all and now all of us. So with that, Daniel, thanks for your time and your willingness to join us today.
Hey. Hi, everybody. That was the best introduction I think I've ever had. That's amazing. Huge thanks to Diane. Thanks to Andy. Thanks to Quentin. Thanks to David. It's great to see some old friends, Jonathan and Ben, new friends, and also great to see the students who totally made me realize happily that I am going to be supplanted and obsolete sooner rather than later. And that's, I think, a good thing. That actually means I think that we've been very successful in the efforts that all of us are doing in this room, trying to drive forward transformation and innovation in the legal profession. It's also just generally, I'll just say, amazing to be up here with the chance to talk about legal transformation to a group of people who are actually doing the transforming either by setting the stage for other people to do virtuous things in the world, or by actually doing those virtuous things themselves. So really just, I don't know, I'm very humbled to be here. Okay, so when you think about agility, nimbleness, being able to pivot quickly in the face of a world that is changing faster and faster right in front of our eyes in ways that would have astonished Isaac Asimov, you think the US Department of Justice. Of course, okay, so that's not going to be the popular conception out there. And I can appreciate why. DOJ, we sit at the intersection of law and government. And that's two kind of venues and arenas that are not exactly known for being the most forward-leaning in terms of as social institutions as far as innovation, transformation, all of that stuff. But if anything, I don't know, I think that this building as designed, right? Like this building as designed, it sort of like conveys some very clear messages on that front. It's really big. It's really intimidating. It's solid. It's reliable. It's grounded in history. I mean, it takes its shape after classic architecture, obviously. So it's grounded in history. And it doesn't change, right? Like the building doesn't change. And, you know, I mean, Churchill said famously, perhaps apocryphally, but famously, we shape our buildings and afterwards our buildings shape us. I think that the building does say a lot about like what the kind of the institution that the Justice Department views itself as. Now, in that place, my job, along with superstars like Becky Slogers, who's back there, is to think about how can we make the kinds of changes and transformations that's going to help us make sense of this. Oh, there we go. Damn, good quote. So it's how are we going to make sense of this, which is, you know, constitutional policing, voting, employment, hate crimes, housing, and all of these other things. These are all these modern kind of civil rights issues that are confronting us today, and that we all in the Justice Department tackle by virtue of the 30+ federal civil rights laws that we're responsible for enforcing. And as an enforcement agency, you know, our job is to make the vision embodied by those 30+ laws that touch on all of these kinds of issues. Our job is to make the vision of those laws a reality for all people in America. And we're trying to do it in a context that's constantly and rapidly evolving. You know, like I'm often struck by what we have, like environmental justice up there. When people built that building I just showed you, environmental justice was not a thing. I mean, I'll tell you, like 5-10 years ago, environmental justice was not something that was in the common discourse. It's very much in the discourse now. And so we're working on making the vision of these laws a reality in a constantly shifting kind of landscape, social landscape. And for folks like Becky and me, our job is to find ways that we can adapt as an organization so we can make much, much more impact on all of these kinds of issues. So I kind of stumbled into this. I grew up in the DC area. My parents, they were small business owners. They were small scale business owners. They immigrated from Korea in the 1970s. And they scraped together enough money over a couple decades of living in the United States to buy and run a mini storage. So this, in fact, is that mini storage for all your storage needs in Suitland, Maryland, Kings Park Mini Storage. So as modest as it was, this was a storage that let me go to college. This was a storage that let me go to law school. And eventually, this was the storage that let me work in that other building I just showed you, which is really just like an honor of my lifetime. I could have never imagined that I would have had the chance to do that. Now, this is not what you would call a particularly fancy mini storage. This is not like those really upscale, glitzy public storages. Public storage is like our nemesis, public storage. But yes, but this is not one of those. This is not one of those. This was way, way, way more modest, as you can tell. The paint was always peeling. The weeds were always growing up around the place. The pavement was kind of cracked. And as a kid, I would work there. I would work there in the summers. And I was kind of embarrassed by it. I'll be honest. I was kind of embarrassed as a kid. My brother and I, my brother's a little older than me, we were constantly telling our parents, like, hey, we should paint this place. We should make this office less cluttered with less boxes everywhere. We should repave the kind of worn out driveways. And basically, we should make this place look a lot more like that fancy public storage down the road. And they would patiently listen. My parents would patiently listen, and they never really, forever, they never really said anything one way or the other. They never really reacted. Now, years of this is like several years of this had gone on when I think my dad finally reached his boiling point. And he said one day, for people who speak Korean, he said, "Na는 da mulunda." That in Korean translates to, you don't have a clue. You don't have a clue. And what I didn't appreciate at that time when I was a teenager was my parents actually had this deeply sophisticated understanding of what they were doing by running this mini storage. My dad, after years of hearing me and my brother second guess him all the time, saying like, why aren't you painting the place? Why aren't you renovating the place? Blah, blah, blah. He basically gave 14-year-old Dan an impromptu class on customer segmentation and comparative advantage. So he explained, in the mini storage market, there's going to be a slice of folks for whom something like renting a storage unit, value and price is the most important thing that they're considering when they're deciding where to store their stuff. And he knew from a lot of different experiments that he was running, actually, that they didn't actually like the fancy glitzy storage place. They didn't like it because, well, for them, it represented more overhead, right? Like it represented like more costs that they were going to be paying to store their stuff. And for that segment of folks, the slightly worn facilities, the lack of credit card swipes, we were like the last people to get a credit card scanner, by the way. The cluttered office, they were all indicators of value, right? Like, i.e., we're not pouring as much into overhead as the other place, and we're passing the savings and the value on to you. Because what we are doing is providing safe, secure storage. That's what we're doing for you. And in other words, and this struck me, a couple years ago when I was at the airport, my parents basically figured out Spirit Airlines before Spirit Airlines existed, right? Like immigrants from Korea stumbled on the Spirit Airlines business model, and they just had done it in the mini storage context. So see, what teenage me, what I didn't get was, it was pretty simple, but it was pretty profound. People want and value different things. And they may not always want and value the same things you want and value. So teenage me was fixated with, I want to work in the fancy storage. Who doesn't want to work in the fancy? Who doesn't want to be a customer of the fancy storage? Obviously, right? Like that's obvious. And so you might be thinking, this is a very, very long introduction, by the way. This is a very long introduction, but let me bring it back to this building here. And what I learned from that mini storage is, in a nutshell, the core philosophy of pretty much everything we do in terms of innovation and transformation at DOJ, which is, and that core principle is this: we as humans are really, really bad at guessing what other people want and need. We're really bad at it. And this is an insight that I think it exists in high abundance in this room. I think I'm speaking a little bit to the choir here. But what I guess when I started doing this work, I just found it in surprisingly short supply in the legal industry and legal profession generally. So, so as lawyers, we guess, basically. We really like to guess. And we do it a lot. And it just strikes me, based on, when we analyze our own situations where we can get better, the instances where we fail to make as much impact as we hope to make, it usually comes down to truly owning and having the humility to appreciate this simple fact of, we're really bad at guessing what other people want and what they need. I think it has something to do, if I were going to hazard a kind of guess at this, I think it has something to do with the idea that we're somehow supposed to be the profession that people turn to for answers. I think it has something to do with it being a little bit scary, I suppose, to acknowledge that the answers are inevitably and invariably actually not in our brains, that we don't know them. Like, we fundamentally don't have access to them directly. And the consequences and examples of this in the legal world abound, right? Like Norman doors. If you've heard the phrase Norman doors, I'm sure folks have heard that, which is like, a door that it's unintuitive to know how to work it. Like, do you press it? Do you pull it? Whatever, right? That's the classic Norman door. Norman doors are everywhere in law. So let's just take a quick look at a few. So this is the line at 9 a.m. to get into small claims court in New York City. Small claims court, I have to say, is in the 1960s, in the days before online dispute resolution was possible, and back in that time, I had to study the history of this. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. This is a brilliant legal innovation, by the way, small claims court. I think we don't get enough credit for this, but someone back in the 1958, I believe, there's a commission in New York that looked into this, and they said, hey, there's this whole segment of society that has problems. And our current legal system, you need to hire a lawyer. It takes a really long time because we have a lot of process around it, due process around it. Well, there's all these disputes that come up every day that can get very, very contentious. They can turn into like really bad social outcomes. And people don't have a way that makes any sense to resolve it because it's about like $100 or it's about $50. And so why don't we create a totally new kind of legal pathway so that people who have small dollar disputes can actually resolve those disputes with perhaps less process, but more speed and less cost, right? Like basically, right? Like it's pretty genius. I actually think, again, we don't get enough credit as a profession for thinking of stuff like this. But here's the thing. I mean, there's one little thing here, which is that if you're filing a case in small claims court, I don't know if this is actually still the case. I hope it's not, but many courts, this is still the case. If your case is scheduled to be heard on a certain day, you get a notice that says, show up at 9 a.m. at this court on this day. That's great, except, so that also went to 40 other people, by the way. That same notice went to 40 other people. And so it's great if you're docket number one. If you're the first one, you get in at 9 a.m., you sit down, your case is called, you get it knocked out, and then you go away with your dispute resolved. It's great, right? Like that's actually worked out really well. But if you were like docket number 40 on that list, it doesn't work out so well because you sit there all day long waiting for every other person's case to be resolved, spending, taking the day off of work, using vacation time or not getting paid if you're hourly, and all maybe to resolve like a $500 dispute. So again, like if you think about expected value of the case, let's expect it's a $500 dispute, coin flip case. So that's $250 of expected value, but you have to give up an entire day's worth of work sitting there potentially in the lottery of dockets, waiting for that to be resolved. That's not so great. So what's the assumption here? Like in law school, I actually interviewed a small claims court judge about this. And I asked him like, why do you do this? It struck me as like, oh, this is self-evident. And he said like, again, nunnen ta mulanda, basically is what he was like, you have no clue, right? You don't get it. Like I've got a docket. You have any clue what the backlog is that we have in small claims court? We have a massive backlog. My staff, we get here and at 9 a.m. we're on the bench and we hear cases and we only stop. We don't take a lunch break. We just go straight through. And the only break we take is to go to the bathroom because we're trying to process as much of this backlog as we possibly can process. And so like, you're telling me like, hey, this doesn't make sense. He was like, if someone's not there ready to go for their next case, right? Like that's transaction costs that's going to happen. That's like dead time that we've got in the court. We've got to keep it moving. We got to keep it moving. And that's the only way we can maximize our productivity. But my only thing is there's an assumption built in there, which is that we want faster disputes resolved in less calendar time, as opposed to, I want the dispute resolved with the least amount of my personal input time, right? And there is a little bit of a mismatch and a disconnect there. Okay, so that I would say is that version of the peeling paint theory. Okay, so the next one, informa pauperis. So this is something that I learned about as a housing clinic student when I was in law school. And it's pretty simple. This is basically free filing. So this is, again, I actually think this is another remarkable legal innovation. People should really, the profession deserves credit for this again. People said, hey, we have to run our courts and people have to pay to use our courts. Except if you're poor, that's a problem because even like the $50 filing fee, $20 filing fee, et cetera, if you don't have any money, that's going to represent a major, major barrier to you being able to access our courts. And that means the justice system isn't available for you. So they said, if you are poor, we are going to waive filing fees. Simple as that. Like that's as simple as it was, but it's actually a really brilliant and a really like smart insight. But then what did they do? They named it informal pauperous. Right? So if you think about this from like a kind of, I don't know, like user group concept, like what is the overlap? What's the Venn diagram of people who have financial need and are poor and who also speak Latin? It's not going to be very big. And in DC for a while, you had to go into court and you actually had to ask for a motion to proceed informal pauperous in order to get the form that you could then fill out to then get free filing. And it's really, I think that that's just an example of, again, I think the assumption built into this is that people really want we don't want to stigmatize people. Like we want to give people, if this is aimed, there's only one target user group for this, poor people, like by definition, like by the inherent definition of this entire service. And I think that the fundamental underlying view here is, like we don't want to stigmatize people, so let's class it up. Let's make it really, really classy for people to use free filing. So we're going to call it informal pauperous. Again, that's the peeling paint theory, right? Like it goes back to the mini storage, it goes back to the peeling paint theory. All right, so this is another one, parking signs. This is actually, in my opinion, like the quintessential legal document. This is really smart. Again, from a legal intervention perspective, this is genius because you're delivering information to when someone needs it to promote compliance and help people do the right thing. Nobody wants to get a parking ticket. Nobody wants to do that. So let's put these signs, these legal instructions right there on the spot where you're doing the thing. This is like in-time information at its peak for lawyers, right? Like it's really, really smart. But obviously it could use some work because, yeah. And these also, for what it's worth, certainly exist in DOJ in even small ways. I'll just give you a couple examples. This is one of my favorite ones. So this is when you walk into the main entrance of the Justice Department. You come in through the main entrance where all the employees come in every day. You walk by this sign, and this is a whistleblower notice sign. This is put up by the folks who want federal employees to report waste, fraud, and abuse. Like when the government is doing something wrong, doing something bad, they genuinely want you to report it. They are this is what they do, and they are passionate about it. And so they put up this sign in the main entrance, giving you all the information you need to know about how to report when you spot waste, fraud, and abuse. There are some perhaps obvious problems with this delivery mechanism, right? Like, it usually, like for one, it's pretty long. It takes a lot of time to read. So I actually stood there and I read it from top to bottom one day. I went like from up here, and then I went over here and I went, and I read it really to understand it. Like I actually I put a clock on myself and I timed it. And I think it took me about 2.5 to 3 minutes to read everything from top to bottom, standing there in front of the sign. The other part that the part I couldn't take a photo of because I was a bit sheepish about it is that like off to camera right here is the security desk where a security guard is sitting there 24 hours a day. And to me, I look at it and I'm like, this is like the perfect whistleblower trap. This is the best way to catch a whistleblower, right? Like if somebody who's going to stand there for like 2.5 minutes in front of the security guard, while all their colleagues are walking by is saying, you're really taking a very, very deep interest in whistleblower rights. It's kind of interesting, right? And so anyway, and the nearest thing I can figure from the parking signs, from the rights notice, do I have one more? I do have one more. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Okay. So this is the way that you would report. This is one more example, civil rights violations reporting. So the part of the Justice Department I work for, big part of our job is hey, we need to partner with the public. So the public needs to contact us to inform us about violations of federal civil rights that then helps our staff do something about it. It informs which investigations we open. It informs like where we focus and sort of allocate priorities, because we really want the public to be a partner with us in this, because they're going to spot stuff that we have no way of spotting. So this was a page that we had up there forever. That was basically how to file a complaint. I think, again, there are some obvious perhaps issues with this. For one thing, if you notice here, you basically needed to know which one of our individual sections did what kind of thing, because each section maintained their own process for, you had to contact each specific section, the right section. I don't know, people might also point out that it's crowded, it's pretty wordy, it's not entirely clear what to do. Those are some of the things that, for what it's worth, people often talk about. But it's a little worse than that. So that was above the fold. This is actually the page. So that was a page. This was actually the page. So when someone in the public who suffered a civil rights violation or witnessed a civil rights violation reached out to the Justice Department to tell the Justice Department about it, this is what came about. Okay, and you know, and I got to give a lot of credit to Northeastern University's New Law Lab, who actually conducted an independent usability study of this. They had 20 people do, given, you know, classic, you know, hypothetical scenarios, and 16 out of the 20, I believe, this was like 5 years ago, failed to file at all or failed to file with the right office. So Dan Jackson often you know, I think at the time he said, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen an intentionally designed system have an 80% failure rate before on a simple usability test. So, okay, yeah. So the nearest I can figure from all of this, right, is parking sign, rights notice, reporting portal, etc., is that we have this core assumption in the law that people want lots of information stuffed on a single page for convenience and thoroughness. And again, this is not a terrible hypothesis in my opinion. It's kind of again on par with my hypothesis about Kings Park mini storage, that it should actually would be better with a fresh coat of paint, smooth blacktop, and better lighting, right? Like, I actually don't think it's unreasonable for someone to think, everybody who's trying to reach out to us, let's give them every little bit of possible things that they want to consider in deciding whether to reach out to us or not, or who to reach out to. So let's like put it all on there so it's all like upfront and ready for someone. You know, and my kind of subsequent observation from this is, you know, we get the results and outcomes for which we design, whether the design is intentional or not. And in this case, I can assure you that there was no one whose intention was to make it hard for people to report civil rights violations. I know, I work with the staff who works on this, and they, just like the staff who works on whistleblower rights, just like the folks who are working on parking signs, they genuinely and deeply want people to do the thing, right? Like the people who put this together genuinely want people to report violations to CRT. That's why they spent so much time and effort building all of this out. They didn't do that for no reason. They actually worked really, really hard and put a ton of sweat equity into actually getting this together. So I don't know, I think it was, but all of it again is this emergent result of a certain hypothesis, which is, you know, BLUF being bottom line up front, not that, but everything up front, which I do think comes up a lot in law. Okay, now this isn't the only place I think this happens. Law isn't the only context where we make the Dan Yee Kings Park mini storage mistake. Philanthropy in general is dotted with these. It's dotted with ambitious ideas to save the world that ultimately collided with reality. This is probably something very familiar to most folks, but this is Play Pump, famous solution to the water crisis around the world. And the concept of this was very simple, which was kids play, it drives a pump, sends water up to a town cistern, which is up here, and then town drinks. Great idea, got a ton of funding. And the basic idea is like, let's both like give kids an opportunity to play and then save and solve water problems everywhere. This ended up being, obviously, for those who know the world of philanthropy around water, this ended up not working out so well. It took millions and millions of dollars in funding, but basically these pumps would break a lot, number one. But number two, what do you think the big problem was with this whole kind of concept? Well, right. Yes. So, for folks who are like parents, and you take your kids to the playground, what do kids do at the playground? They play on the swing set for a second, and then they maybe do that for 5 minutes, and then they run to like the merry-go-round, and then they do that, and then they go to like the whatever teeter-totter, and then they do all of this. But what they don't do? Spend time hours at a time spinning around on the merry-go-round. That's not actually a kid behavior. So again, like assumption, oh yeah, kids really want this stuff. And then like, oh, let's harness that to get water. Again, like there's a assumption in there that was just kind of off. So if we embrace this foundational belief that we're fallible. That's all it is. That's all I'm really saying is that if we really believe that we're fallible, then kind of what happens from that? I'd say that every single thing that our community, the folks in this room talk about when we think about the innovation toolkit, design thinking, user-centered design, lean startup, agile, et cetera, we can keep on going. I think all of that just becomes something that I have boldly coined applied common sense, right? Like that's like, of course you would spend, like, again, assume that we're fallible and we are bad at guessing what other people want. Let's take that. And not only are other people bad at it, I'm bad at it, and you're bad at it, and everybody's bad at this. So of course you would spend time upfront researching for understanding. You would spend time with the people you're trying to help because you need to understand and validate that you actually understand the challenge correctly. Of course, you would want to create fast and cheap prototypes of something, like whether it's a product, policy, service, whatever, because the chances are high that you don't know what people want and need. And then why spend a ton of time building and launching something that might miss the mark, that people might not use? Of course, you would want to put these ideas to the test. You'd test these prototypes in whatever form they might be by putting it in front of the actual people that need to use it. Because how else are you going to know whether you're getting closer or further away from the mark? And of course, you're going to build iteration cycles into your work, right? Like, in fact, you're probably going to be, and I know I am, you're probably going to be quite worried if someone comes to you with their first idea. They said, last night, I had this flash of inspiration. I think we should do X, Y, and Z. Let's just do it, right? And you'd probably be a little worried about that because you'd say, well, like, this is version 1. Like, how many times have you evolved and shaped this before you actually committed your time and energy to it? So of course you'd build iteration cycles into your work because, again, we're bad at guessing. And of course you would focus on continually improving and evolving whatever you put out into the world, because it's unlikely that no matter how much upfront work you did, you're not going to have everything dialed in to start. And finally, of course, you would set standards for yourself about what success might be, about how you're going to critically evaluate whether whatever you did was actually leading to the desired outcomes you were hoping to get, because how else are you going to know? So really, and again, this is a big one. And of course, you would think about desirability alongside feasibility and viability. And in fact, probably acknowledge that we're, as often as discussed, that we should focus on desirability to start and then only get dragged kicking and screaming down into this little upper corner of viable and feasible, because that's where the best stuff happens. Okay, so yeah, and of course, this is, of course you would focus on investing time in upfront, right? Even though it's going to lead to less progress upfront, because you believe all of that upfront user research, all of that effort upfront is going to pay off down the road with better outcomes, like that delta. So, all of these things are just, sensible with that in mind. So for us at DOJ, the goal and our challenge is, how do we move beyond just saying, oh, we do design thinking, oh, we do lean startup, or oh, we do agile. How do we move beyond that to, we do common sense, right? Like, this is just common sense for us. This is just how we do everything that we do. Now, in DOJ, so what does this look like in DOJ? To give you some concrete examples of this. So how do we make applied common sense happen in a large legal organization that has strong pre-existing structures and practices? Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that those pre-existing behavior, like I like to start by just, again, a lot of folks have talked about it, look around you and find like examples of those pre-existing behaviors where frankly, lawyers are already doing this pretty much. And whether they know that's what they're doing or not. So one classic example is mock juries. Mock juries, that is quintessential user testing, right? Like that's something all lawyers do. All lawyers understand why you would do it, but that's like quintessential usability testing right there. And it's something that they're already doing as part of like what a lawyer does. Okay, it's also, and I'll just kind of talk a little bit like this is, we recently, announced the results of our investigation into the Louisville Police Department. But I got to tell you, this was obviously a major day where, this was a culmination of so much work that the staff did here, where they were doing ride-alongs. They were spending significant time embedded in the community, both on the law enforcement side and on the community side, trying to gain empathy and an understanding for how these issues were affecting them. And, and not only that, when we do policing reforms, we make this an iterative process where, if you read any of our police reform agreements, we build in checkpoints along the way so that we can determine, are we headed in the right way or not? We build in these iterative loops so that we can course correct. So I wish I could take credit for stuff like this. This is just how they operated. This is just like, they were like, of course you would do this if you're gonna try to implement reforms in complex, very, very hard to understand systems, such as law enforcement in a community. Of course, you're going to do these kinds of things. I wish, again, I could take credit for it, but this was pre-existing behavior. So my point is, the roots of these virtuous behaviors and instincts are there, I think, within the profession. And what we're trying to cultivate and grow, at least for folks like Becky and me, what we're trying to cultivate and grow are these instincts more broadly across everything that we do, and to institutionalize and build these habits and muscles. And so for us, where we're starting is just legal communication. All right, so legal communication is one area where we're making a major investment. Public communications and forms, pretty simple. So very in line with what where we've been talking about today. And our belief on that front is really simple. If our intended audiences can actually understand what we're saying, it's much more likely that people will actually do the things that we want them to do, which is generally complying with the law. And I think it's a great place for us to start and to build those muscles, because we do it all the time. It really matters. And generally, we have very clear demonstrable goals with what we're hoping to achieve. So if we can establish a beachhead there with legal communication, I think the challenge of growing applied common sense across the organization and in all the different use cases where we need to apply it, it gets a lot easier. And so for some concrete examples here, let me give you a flavor of what we're doing. So ada.gov is one example. DOJ, we've been making a major effort to bring lawyers together with product strategists, content strategy, design, developers, to take this, which was the previous ada.gov, and now it's this. Complies with US web design standards. Language is much more plain language oriented. It's geared towards actionability for people. And I encourage you to go visit it. We have a whole sort of great team working around this now, and that I think is the right blend of people to put around an informational resource like ada.gov. Oh, and here's one piece of feedback we got, which is a good example. It's great when you get stuff like this. We don't usually get things like this, by the way, until we started doing this. So this is really good. Okay, so then civil rights reporting portal. That's another example. So this was, we saw this earlier. Well, this is what it looks like today. And you can go to civilrights.justice.gov, and you can even, it's a guided form, basically a guided form. I wish I talked to the DocAssemble guys before, when we were doing this, but we built out this, it's a great guided form. It works fabulously. We've been able to, I think, more than double the number of people who can file reports or who are filing reports. We've reduced the amount of time it takes us to analyze those reports. And we're creating, this is really just a real showcase for the power of exactly the things that we're talking about here. And again, great. We don't normally get things like this until we started doing this. So that's great. And this is a real comment, by the way. I thought that was really nice. It was really nice. So anyway, another one is just like simple letters. This was a project. This was like a really fun lunchtime project called Better Letter, where basically what we do is we file, we settle all these cases where we create victim funds, a lot like class actions, right? It's our equivalent of a class action. We have hundreds, possibly thousands of people around the country who deserve relief based on some settlement that the government reached with someone who violated the law. And so we have to communicate with them about how they can actually get financial relief from this settlement. And what you see here is like, and this is a classic DOJ letter, but we would send them a letter. And our response rates are much better than what typical class action response rates are, participation rates. But for our lawyers who are sweating blood for years, they spend years bringing these cases and investigating these cases and eventually, hopefully getting to a positive outcome. They were like, we want 100% participation because we're doing all this work. All of the work we're doing is really to benefit people, but we're not getting 100% of people doing this. What can we do better on this front? Far short of 100%, in fact. What can we do better? And our hypothesis was we could do something around communication on this front. And again, yeah, this is a classic, what we were using before. And so what did we do? A bunch of lawyers and legal staff got together. This was like a lunchtime project. They got together during lunch and they kind of worked through the process of trying to understand how people prioritize mail. I think they even went out and like watched people opening mail. Like they would go to their mailbox and say, okay, well, what letters are you keeping towards the top? What are you putting towards the bottom? And then they, guess what? Did like rapid rough prototyping. This was like the early prototype of what a new letter could be. And then they put this in front of people. Like this is what they put in front of people, which people might be embarrassed by, right? Again, like going back to some of the, Rochelle, I think had mentioned this before about being worried about putting stuff in front of people. I actually think you should put this in front of people because they're way more likely to tell you like what's wrong with this when it's just scribbles on paper instead of something that it looks like you spent months and months and months working on and said, hey, how does this look? And then they're going to be like, fine, I guess, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. No one's going to hurt anyone's feelings when they say, I don't know what this whole thing is for. Like, what is this about or whatever, right? And then you can ask, what do you think it should be about? Classic question. So anyway, this has led to a new package that has dramatically increased participation rates in our settlements. So that's really great. We have a public communications guide now. This is now where we're building out the people, process, tools part of helping everybody do user-centered communication more effectively. And I'm happy to, and oh yeah, here's another example of something that came out of public communications guide. This is a consent decree. You can think about these consent decrees. These are products. These are basically instruction manuals, right? Like these are instruction manuals telling people in a case, it's a contract effectively in many ways, because it lays out what does someone have to do when to comply with a court-ordered or court-entered consent decree. Well, this is what our folks are now producing as part of this, which I think is so cool, which is, sure, they have like the legal document that goes into court that complies with the various, rules of local rules, or as far as what the legal document needs to, the format of the legal document. But this is what they're also producing because they know we need to create something more usable for people and also other interested parties. So this is one example. I think this is so cool that now they create these simplified, very useful and easy to use derivations of those consent decrees that actually kind of communicates to people what what is the consent decree actually changing about their everyday lives? And finally, this is something, well, not quite finally, but almost finally, this is something where we're building agency-wide energy behind this. Big credit to the Office for Access to Justice, the new Office for Access to Justice in DOJ, because their last legal aid interagency roundtable focused on form and language simplification. And I encourage you all to go find it. There's some great stuff on there, but what they're trying to do is normalize this, because if the Justice Department can do this and the Justice Department wants to put their energy behind this, our feeling is that no agency has any excuse, because we're the last people who you normally think would be doing this. So really terrific there. And finally, the DOJ strategic plan, for the first time I've ever seen, actually talks about this as part of the plan. I personally wanted them to just say applied common sense in this, but they didn't. They went with that instead. That's fine. But I'm super excited about the fact that this is in goal 1, strategy 1 of the DOJ strategic plan, which is, I couldn't have even imagined that from when I started this work, 7 years ago. But so my bottom line point is this: there's a path forward for legal transformation, and that path starts with collective humility. We all need to have that we've just basically been bad at guessing about what other people want or need. And once we've collectively embraced that, I really believe that so many of the things all of us are sort of fighting so hard to turn the legal profession towards, they just become applied common sense. And that's a really, really hopeful prospect for me. And I'm just really glad to be here with you today, learning from all of you who have really, truly been leading the charge on all of these fronts. And thank you so much for letting me be part of this.
Well, that was just great. I love the energy in this room. To the people online, you're still online. The numbers have stayed solid all day. They're still, you're in your seats. You're my people. I love you. Again, nature is healing because we are not ahead of schedule. We are on schedule. It's perfect, which means we have 5 minutes for you to take a little break, bust your stuff, and then we're going to come back, and then our very own Quentin and Bryce are going to help you in person and online build something. If you want to build something, don't get scared by that. If you don't want to build, you can watch, but there'll be something for everyone. So see you in 5.